Good morning, and welcome to Chapel Chat. I'm Pastor Kevin Little, and this is the chapel at Rancho First United Methodist Church. Today, I'm going to talk about the things that we say and the impact that they can have. We live in a society right now where it's incredibly easy to damage an individual with words. Now, sure, some of you who are watching this might be thinking that people who are sensitive to what others say just need to toughen up. That's not always easy, and I'd be willing to bet that there was a time in your life when someone said something to you that you didn't care for, maybe even on a bad day, and it had an impact on you as well. Most of you who are watching this aren't what most people would be considered as kids. I'm childish, so who knows? But you don't travel in the same circles as our youth might. But even still, you might have heard about the concept of cyberbullying. You might have been bullied in your past. You might have even been the bully. But at a certain point for most of us, when we were being bullied, we could go home and at least escape the nastiness for a period of time before having to face it again. That's not as easy to do in today's world with all of the connections through social media. And yes, for those of us who are older, we can just say, turn off the phone or computer, but that doesn't stop someone from running their mouth to all of a kid's friends online, or an adult for that matter. There's much less escape from the nastiness of the world right now for all of us. I saw a post on Facebook this week calling out a local business for something that someone thought they had done wrong. Names were called, words were said, reputations were damaged on both sides. It was a public fight where everyone could take a seat, grab some popcorn, and just enjoy the show. Now, normally, you'd have had to have been present in the same building to get this kind of show. But today, it happens all the time online. And it has meaning. All it takes is one bad day, and people will happily film you at your worst and post it for everyone to see. All it takes is one word, said in frustration, to change a career in our society right now. And so we have to learn to be better or face the consequences. Now, I'm going to use an example that might be triggering for some of you, and I apologize in advance if you find it upsetting. But most of you are probably old enough to remember the word retard. It's a simple word in the English language that means to slow something down. Over time, it became used to describe individuals who are mentally handicapped, indicating that their thought processes are slower than that of normal individuals. Now, as I grew up, the word shifted from a specific application to a broader use that indicated that something was stupid. The phrase we used was, well, that was retarded. And then, in the early 2000s, society hit a wall with that phrase, and it was no longer okay. Something that had been around for a long time now was no longer okay for people to say. And we either had to learn that lesson and adapt quickly, or potentially suffer the consequences. I know of one individual who had a very public job who simply slipped and used a phrase that he had grown up with, and it cost him that job. The word, whether it was truly meant to or not, caused harm to other individuals, and that made it not worth saying anymore. I hear complaints about things like cancel culture or political correctness. Those complaints always run along the same vein, that people just need to toughen up, or it was okay to say that when I was younger, so it should still be fine. That didn't actually make it okay. It still caused harm whether we were emotionally smart enough to figure that out or not. And to stop saying something that could cause harm to another individual, whether we understand it or not, doesn't actually hurt us at all. And it actually makes us better people. And now we get to where I'm really going here. Churches in general, and the United Methodist Church in specific, have hit a point where we need to recognize that what we say is causing harm to others and figure out a way to be better. In the Book of Discipline, we have a paragraph about our position on the topic of human sexuality. In that paragraph is the phrase, The United Methodist Church does not condone the practice of homosexuality and considers this practice incompatible with Christian teaching. Now, it's been there since about 4 years into the life of the United Methodist Church in one form or another, and is essentially the source of why some pastors, congregations, and churches are leaving the denomination. Not because they disagree with it, but because they agree with it, and the majority of individuals in the UMC either disagree or think that it's much less important than many other issues we face, and so we're trying to change it. Now, the largest problem with this phrase in society today is the part where it says incompatible with Christian teaching. On the surface, it seems like it makes sense and it's an okay thing to say. But when we dig deeper, things get a little bit more unpleasant. For whatever reason, heterosexual individuals look at homosexuality as a choice that is being made rather than a defining characteristic of an individual. I've heard people use the argument, well, I don't just walk around and decide to be heterosexual and flaunt it all the time, or something along those lines, which technically is correct. The majority of people tend to be heterosexual because they're born that way, and our society is designed with those considerations in mind. It's just like our society is designed to be easier for white people than black or Hispanic or anyone else. Heterosexual white people made the rules, so those of us that fall into those categories have a harder time seeing the problem. But over time and communication and psychological study, it has become understood that a person's sexuality is in fact an element within them that helps to define who they are. It's a part of our very being. And when a person's very being is said to be incompatible with Christian teaching, that person understands themselves as being incompatible with Christian teaching. And that's just not okay. Not once does Jesus use the phrase incompatible with Christian teaching. A, because Jesus wasn't Christian, he was Jewish and was working to reform the Jewish faith, and B, because Jesus was hanging out with the people that the church believed was incompatible with their teaching at the time and putting them in charge of the movement that he was creating. Jesus didn't look at Matthew and tell him that he couldn't follow him because his job as a tax collector was ethically questionable. He didn't stop James and John from being obnoxious, loud, and prone to violence, even when he had to stop them from raining fire down on a town. Jesus works with people the way they are because all people are compatible with Christian teaching. There are people around us who are struggling because of the way churches talk about their very being. It's not sensitivity at that point. It's insensitivity on the part of the church, and it's having an impact. Suicide rates for LGBTQ individuals are high, and I personally know people who have been hurt by churches on this topic and has damaged their views of the church and, more importantly, their views about themselves. And as usual, it's okay to disagree with me. That's okay. I'll still respect you just as much as I already do. But if you made it this far and you disagree, will you at least consider thinking about how our words affect people as we move forward? Will you consider taking extra steps to be kind to people like Jesus was? Will you consider making someone feel valued rather than pointing out that they are incompatible with your views? And if you do agree with me, or this is something that you've experienced and are struggling with right now, you're not alone. You're valued by myself, Emily, Susan, and most importantly, Jesus. You're loved by myself, Emily, Susan, and Jesus. We don't believe that you are incompatible with Christian teaching. We believe that you are every bit as important to the church as anyone else is, and that God has a purpose for you in the world, in the life of the United Methodist denomination, and in your community. Thanks for joining me for another Chapel Chat. I'll see you again next time. Have a great week.